Ben, do your best to quantify what the hell we saw yesterday.
Oh, boy. I mean, I was talking to a friend last night. He was like, take that last, 90 seconds, 2 minutes or so of the Cowboys game and then put it into just 60 minutes. Like, that was it was like that the whole game. If we just focused on the first quarter, that was an insane amount of things that were happening, and then it spread out over four. But I would say it's from a Washington perspective that, we talk about in the NFL, teams are looking for that franchise quarterback. And I think that it's such it's a misunderstood term because people think just because you draft somebody in the first round or you have a guy that's a pretty, good starter, that means you have one of those. You might have a good player, but there's a difference. And for me, those guys are the ones who, when everything is going wrong around them, whether that's injuries or just the pieces on the field, whatever it is, that they are able to lift up the team by their performance. And, I don't know if there's much better example than what we saw yesterday. It wasn't Jayden Daniels' cleanest game, the 2 interceptions, but when you, consider, the opponent, the stakes, we know they're missing some pieces on offense that, this is still year one of a rebuild or recalibration, and the performance that, what he did in the fourth quarter, as we've now seen this several times this year, it is really the makings of one of those guys who you could say is a franchise quarterback. He hasn't played enough for me to definitively say he's there, but man, the traits are certainly there. And that was another one of the performances that makes me really think that.
And what was it yesterday that impressed you the most? Because it seemed like nothing else was working except for anything that involved Jayden Daniels, whether it was him running, him in the passing game. What impressed you the most about that performance, which is probably his best to date?
Yeah, I mean, his movements in the pocket, whether it's just stepping away from a pass rush or his ability to get down the field and juke defenders as we saw yesterday. I mean, that's a pretty elite trait. But broadly, I am getting almost frustrated to the point of how calm he is at all times. Like, nobody is like this. I don't quite understand it as somebody who's constantly in his own head and herky jerky moving around this world. He doesn't seem to be rattled ever by anything. It's just incredibly bizarre, and it's something that the teammates, the coaches have talked about for months now, going back to even before the season started. But now that we're in the season and you see these things happen in the fourth quarter, like when there was no reason for Washington to be in this game. Right, for the most part. Philly had multiple times they should have put it away. And when it got to 2 minutes to go and Washington has the ball down 5, and I've been writing a story to some version of hey, here's some of the reasons why they may have lost this one. I was like, oh, man, he's going to go down and score a touchdown, isn't he? And he did. And just to have that calming presence and that confidence that comes with that, I mean, that's just a remarkable asset for any team to have.
Ben Standig of The Athletic with us here on G&D. All right, let's take our medicine here as we're on a sugar high, and we should be. That was incredible. That was awesome. It was so much fun. I'm not apologizing for any of it. But the bad was bad. The low moments, whether it was the turnovers, the start they got off to, not being able to stop anybody, just how bad was it while Jalen Hurts was still in the game?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a pretty tough look. Saquon Barkley, really, really good, but you can't give up over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns to anybody, but especially the same guy who just in the last game in the fourth quarter did the same thing to you. They added Marshon Lattimore for a variety of reasons, but number one, I would probably guess, is his ability to be able to cover a receiver to some degree on his own will therefore allow you to stack the box, and somehow that wasn't working either. On offense, yeah, the turnovers were just too much. That was a weird Brian Robinson game. We haven't seen him put the ball on the ground like that, and then to do it twice, and then nothing on the ground working other than Jayden Daniels. That was tough. I mean, I still, no matter what is happening here, I'm constantly in top of mind for me is that this is a roster that still has a lot of things it needs. That's what makes it so incredible that they are where they are, because this is only year one of this sort of roster retool, and they have to get, more talent, more playmakers. So I think that's, when they've gone against some of the better teams in the league, they were 0-4 against teams with winning records before yesterday. And like you said, Jalen Hurts, it was looking like it might be 0-5. So yeah, I mean, there's still work to do, but I think to me, it's more like work they can do in the off season more than it is like the coaches or the players have to do something different. Cause I think for the most part, most of these guys are probably maxing out to some degree.
Marshon Lattimore was on the field for he was there last week, but they didn't have anybody that's a lead. He didn't get targeted this week. Obviously going up against AJ Brown matched up there. I thought he was up and down. What'd you make of his performance? And then we're going to learn more from DQ in just a little bit, but did you get any inkling if it's something that's serious or if it's something that's going to linger, or what do you have an update on Marshon Lattimore?
Yeah, not too sure about the injury yet. Like you said, we'll hear from Dan Quinn in about 20 minutes, but obviously, if there was a question about the trade, it wasn't so much the compensation because they did have extra picks and getting a guy with his talent under contract for the next couple of years, in theory checks a box for one of the areas of need that you need. The question was the injuries. He's missed a bunch of games the last few years. Obviously, after the trade, he misses 4 games, and now to go out with his hamstring injury, I'm not I don't know enough about the hamstring to know what if something like that is just going to be continually chronic or what's going on. But obviously that's the concern from a football perspective. Like you said, up and down. Had some really nice moments against AJ Brown early on, and maybe we can quibble about some of those pass interference penalties. But there was still you got on the wrong end enough against AJ Brown. And, it was interesting to have the Saints just refuse to throw his way. And the Eagles had no qualms about that. Got the 2 pass interference penalties, which is on the first drive of the second half, which led directly to that first field goal for the Eagles of the second half. So, yeah, an up and down day. Chalk it up to some degree to still, getting used to some things here. And also AJ Brown's really, really good. But it was not quite it's the game. It's the kind of game you bring in a guy like that for, but not the kind of performance that you're hoping for.
So, Ben, I talked about this at the top of the show today. The thing that makes what Jayden Daniels did yesterday that much more remarkable is, and it feels like I'm just picking on these guys. I don't mean to, but Jamison Crowder, De'Ami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, and Olamide Zaccheaus are all guys that couldn't get looks and targets because Noah Brown was there, who got cut by the Houston Texans. Like, this isn't the 99 Rams. This isn't like Harrison and Reggie Wayne lining up on opposite sides. That's what's so incredible about this to me is the 94th and 103rd best receivers maybe in the NFL each have a couple of touchdown catches, and it's one part Kingsbury deserves credit for it, but it's like 99 parts Daniels. I don't really have a great question about that, but go into it.
Yeah, well, this is kind of what I was meaning when I was talking before about a franchise quarterback. Again, I'm not making this comparison, but it reminds me of those so many of the Tom Brady years with New England, where you're like, who does he have playing receiver? I mean, I'll never forget they had 1 year that Rashae Caldwell was the Patriots' best receiver, who was kind of just a random guy. The next year he lands on Washington and gets cut during the season. Look at Mahomes, to some degree, the last couple of years, other than Travis Kelce and tight end, he just hasn't had much to work with, but he makes these guys work. And, look, Zaccheaus and Crowder, they are absolutely NFL receivers, right? They are totally viable, but you're just not looking at them at the top of the food chain viable. You're not thinking like, hey, big play, we're going to go to that guy. But when you have these kinds of quarterbacks, if you do your part and everybody does their part, they make the play. And that was, no better example again than what happened yesterday, that these guys are the big help. Now, look, obviously he's got Terry McLaurin. I'm not discounting that.
Sure.
But, to have, I mean, like, I thought it would be a close game, but I thought it'd be low scoring because I couldn't figure out how Washington was going to be able to score enough when you're missing, like you said, Noah Brown, who was cut by another team earlier this year. You're missing Austin Eckler. Zach Ertz played, but was clearly limited. And to have this with these other, random parts thriving like that, 5 touchdown passes, it's remarkable.
Washington had no run game essentially outside of Jayden yesterday. How much of that is that Eagles run defense and having, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, those guys up front versus, and I felt like this interior O line has kind of struggled for about a month or so now. They didn't have much going last week against the Saints. I thought they played well against the Titans, but then going back to the losing streak, I didn't think they played well in there. Is there maybe something going on with the interior there, or is it just something that they just didn't have the run game going because the Eagles had a good run defense yesterday?
Yeah, no, I've been a little surprised that it's been this way. I mean, I think losing Austin Eckler is obviously been a blow. I think it's a bigger blow when it comes to the passing game because none of these other running backs that they currently have can really run a route and catch a pass. I think that you mentioned the interior part of the line. I think there is something to be said for that it has not been as good. And yeah, the Eagles obviously have a pretty good front to boot, and then Robinson losing the two fumbles. I don't know how much of that messes with his, with his mindset with Kingsbury's or not. But yeah, I mean, again, to the point of the Daniels thing, to not have the ground game at all beyond his own legs, and then to not have the safety valve or playmaker or pass catcher out of the backfield, and then still do all that, it is pretty crazy. But yeah, I've been wondering, is there somebody that they could possibly add to the roster? Before Kazmir Allen got hurt, I kind of wondered, could you bring in a guy like him who everybody raves about his speed? Maybe even the Wiley kid, the undrafted free agent who was, stood out a bit in camp and preseason. But you need that type of guy, and maybe if you have that, it helps loosen things up on the inside as well. But yeah, they're going to have to get the run game going because you can't just rely on Daniels the whole time.
As they come down the stretch here, Ben, last couple of meaningful games, you win one, especially the Atlanta one, you're in, but there's a great path for them, especially to get to 11 wins, which they haven't done since 91. What's the biggest concern here for that defense these last couple of games and potentially for the postseason? What's the number one thing we should be worried about?
Well, I mean, I think the run defense, right? I mean, the only two games this year that they really have, the numbers were on their side. The Tennessee game, when they got up on the Titans so quickly that, they just had kind of abandoned Tony Pollard. And the Saints, Alvin Kamara is really good, but the quarterback situation for them and their whole offense is, pretty bleak. So other than that, every team has just been, pretty much gassing them against the run all year, even before John Allen was hurt. Now, maybe Allen, I think there's a chance he comes back this week. We'll have to see how he progressed after last week. But, does that help? I mean, you would think logically it would, but to me, that's going to be the biggest deal. They can't figure out a way to stop the run. And you look ahead, to postseason matchups. Obviously, they could be against Barkley again. If you're facing Detroit, they've got Jahmyr Gibbs and we can keep going. That to me is the big issue. If you can't control that, you're going to lose the time of possession. You're going to get, you're just going to make it much harder to stop anything else. So I think that to me is the big worry going forward here.
Ben, appreciate the time, man. Have a great holidays. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, guys. See ya.